Hello, I'm Dr. Terry James Gingrass, and this is Dr. G's ADHD chat show trying to make the world a little safer for ADHDers. I am a clinical neuropsychologist, and I'm also the father of a couple of ADHD kids, and I'm married into a whole line of ADHD people. And I have we started having children before there was such a thing as ADHD. So it was kind of rough at the beginning. We had to learn all this stuff as we went along. Some of it we got in time, and some of it was just too late, and I'm sorry, we couldn't do any better kind of thing. So that's the way it is, and that's the way it was. Since my children started exhibiting ADHD signs and symptoms, I've learned a whole heck of a lot. I have been to tons of conferences and bought tons of books and, done all the things you can do on the internet, which thank God for that, which helps you a lot. And I remember this time of year, going back to school, we're getting ready, it's warming up, the school sales are going on. It's a time of some tension. It's like, what is it going to be like? Because I tell you what, especially in elementary schools, the teacher you get is terribly important. Okay, I've in my private practice, I've had tons of families with ADHD children, or people that are not sure are ADHD, but they come in. Some of the times the mothers have come in with report cards, their whole child's academic history so far. And it is amazing the differences. Some years are a disaster. Some years are great. They do well. And I'll tell you, teachers know this. They don't necessarily share it with everybody, but they know that there are some teachers who are better with ADHD children than others. The ones who don't do well are the strict disciplinarian, yell and scream and throw temper tantrums at the front of the room and all that stuff. You will never get through to an ADHD kid with that kind of attitude and that kind of performance. But I mean, it was really obvious to me just looking at the grades. So there are some things you need to do when it's this season of getting ready for school. And for some of you may have already started back, but the first thing you need to do, the first is the school system, okay? Go to Parents' Night or whatever they're calling it, when they start the new year. Almost every school has one where all the teachers come in and talk to the dedicated parents who've shown up. That's important. Know who your child's teacher is, meet her, talk to her. Ideally, you've already talked to her somewhat before this, but it's ideal. You've got, you need to talk to them, kind of get a notion of where they are coming from. And, your special concerns about their child and things you'd like them to be looking out for and that sort of stuff, Understand you're not dealing with a clinician, you're dealing with a teacher, and but they're vitally important for your child's success, development, all of that. So you've got to be doing your best you can't be at war with the teacher, let's put it that way. Okay, teacher you've got to have a relationship with. It'd be nice if it was a friendly social relationship, but at least it's got to be a business-like relationship where you can get along with each other and set up systems and that sort of thing. If you have a 504 plan, and you should, okay, it's nothing embarrassing. There's not, lots of people have 504 plans, but sometimes Sometimes ADHD people are a little oversensitive, not just the kids with the reflex or with the rejection sensitive dysphoria, but the kids, the parents who don't want anybody to know, who are a little bit ashamed, that sort of that can't be you. Okay, you've got a situation that if you deal with it directly, it will work out way better for you and for your child. There's just no getting around it. So 504 plan, if you're not familiar with what that is, okay. Technically, ADHD is a disability in terms of the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's like, and of course you hear nowadays the thing is, "Oh, it's not a disability, it's a difference." Well, whatever, but thankfully, as a disability, you can get some special procedures, some special assistance, some special things they'll do for your kid. I mean, it can be as simple as preferential seating. Seat them right in the front where they have just you to, or just the teacher to pay attention to. That's an easy, and it's not hard to sell because it doesn't cost them anything, and that's what they like about 504 plans. So make sure you've reviewed the current plan. Look, have taken some notes over the years so you can kind of look back and say, well, this worked out pretty well. This one didn't do so great. We need a little more of this, a little less of that. Go in there knowing what you want. Okay, it's you go in. I will confess that I was kind of like, oh, whatever, Back in those days, I didn't exactly know what I was talking about, and I had the added burden of being the psychologist who's supposed to know everything about everything. Anyway, you're not born knowing everything about everything if you weren't aware of that. Okay, so 504 plans. Look at that and see if there's anything you need to change, anything you need to add, that sort of stuff. Set up your meeting. They call them different things in different school districts, but basically it's the school mucky mucks and you getting together and discussing what they think is best for your child, and what you discussing what you think is best for your child. One other thing that I learned way late. Okay, it was pretty much too late by the time I learned about it. But you can actually request a specific teacher for your child. Okay, I mean, it's not a total giveaway. You don't get total control of it, but of the teachers that are teaching your child's grade, there will be one or two of them that are better working with ADHD kids than others. Okay? And all the other teachers know who those people are. And if you've got a neighbor who's a teacher, you're in good shape, or you're in better shape, because he or she will at least know who the better teachers for ADHD are, if you actually ask them, and it'd be a good idea to, can get their on their social radar, and just get all the information you can as fast as you can. Okay, and so I mean, I did not know that, like I said, until it was too late, that I can actually do that. Huh. You're not a victim. They are not in charge. Totally, you have some room, but be a little bit diplomatic about it. You want a working relationship, because it's going to be a long year, and it won't always go real smoothly, but hopefully it will. So you've visited the school, you know who the teacher is, you've met him or her, you've hopefully set up a time to come and talk in a little bit more detail. You have reviewed the 504 plan. You've reviewed, hopefully you have an neuropsychological or psychological evaluation that's been done, and you can review the strengths and weaknesses there. And sometimes, teachers will say, "Oh, yeah, that I know when I used, when I worked with those kind of with kids who have that particular issue, this has worked out well." So you'll be going in there reviewing some information for them, because I will tell you the number of teachers who will read a full evaluation on a child, and not that many. So it's helpful if you go in there and kind of can quickly summarize and tell them, what the specific weaknesses are, because ADHD is that big thing, and some little pieces are more problematic than others, and it's really important that you are comfortable figuring that out, and if you've got anything that works particularly well with your child, the big deal with ADHD is getting them going, getting them started, because they're in a system all day in school where it wasn't designed for them. I'm not sure who it was designed for, honestly. People who can sit still, keep quiet, not cause any problems for 6 hours or so every day. And, let's just say I had 2 boys and a girl, and my daughter just kind of slid through, and then she didn't get diagnosed until later. My little guy had, it was obvious that he had ADHD, and so you've got to have teachers who can work with that and know what they're doing with that, because it's not gonna happen magically, okay? Because everybody's on this willpower, let's just try harder kind of thing, and that's not the way an ADHD brain works, okay? They don't really work just because somebody's yelling at them. That just is a turnoff, and it doesn't work out very well. So the other big area, you've met the teachers, you've seen the school, you've taken when they're younger, they really need, you need to walk them to the room and all that stuff, whenever they have visiting days. And then you've talked to the teachers, and you've set up an appointment with your child's teacher. And of course, nowadays, it's a lot of times there's teachers are specialized, and so your kid will start having multiple teachers right from the get-go. You'll have to adapt and adjust, because they all need to know. And so that may mean a lot of meetings for you, but they've got to know what your child's needs are, what works with him or her, and what doesn't work, and specific things you'd like to see developed, specific interests he or she has got, stuff that lights them up. Teachers will appreciate that. Okay, then we go to the home routine. Okay, hopefully, I've talked about this sort of thing before, but hopefully you haven't just let it go to whoopee as far as routines at the home are over the summer. Sometimes it's easy to get that way. You get sports and vacations and all kinds of stuff going on, and it is easy to not keep a routine going. But routines are vitally important for ADHDers, actually for anybody, but they are really important for an ADHDer. When things aren't predictable, they get a little freaky. They don't know what's coming next. They're ready. They're on guard. So you need to keep the routine pretty much the same, as close to the same as you can. And it's a lot more difficult nowadays than it was certainly when I was a kid, and when my children were small. It was a little easier. Nowadays, we got electronic devices. We got video games, which if you were trying to design something that would make an ADHDer addicted, it would be a video game. It's perfect. It's fast moving, lots of action, lots of excitement, and immediate feedback. And if you're a child, it also hyper focuses on those things, which is very likely. I mean, you can have marathons, you can have him up or her all hours of the day and night. And guess what? That ain't going to work at school. That's not going to work as an adult. But I mean, I had one kid, bright guy, bright kid, but he got hooked on video games. Apparently he had an uncle who was the cliche, still, an adult, but still living in his mother's basement kind of thing. And that's all he did was the uncle. That's all he did was video games. And so the child I was seeing as a patient he liked that guy. He liked, pretty cool, So he got hooked on it anyway. He lost a whole year of high school because he was clever. He knew his parents. Okay, his dad was a doctor, and he kept having all these symptoms, vague abdominal stuff, and some of that stuff's really hard to pin down, especially if you're getting played. And so this kid must have had every test, X-ray, CAT scan, MRI known to man. I bet you he had $1 million workup. And they never found anything because there wasn't anything to find. But he ended up getting away with it so well that he missed his whole sophomore year in high school. I mean, obviously, we don't want that, but we have to establish some controls over video games right from the get-go and just keep them in place through the summer. And that'll be a little trickier. I mean, I'm from the generation that our parents told us, will you get out of the house and go play somewhere? That was, sounds funny now, but I don't know why it should be. Because when the street lights came on, it was time to be home. Other than that, you could be gone all day. Nobody much cared. Did you get anything to eat for lunch? Nah, we didn't bother. We were down at the creek fishing, or we were playing ball at the Little League field. Or, by the way, they used to leave Little League fields empty, and so you could use them without formal team affiliation and all that stuff. The world has become increasingly regulated, and I'm not sure that's all to the good. But so at home, your routines need to be, you need to keep them as intact as you can over the summer, because it's just making them a little more sharp and focused is a lot easier if they're still been there and been largely paid attention to. Okay, things like bedtimes, meal times, those especially, and that, they're not staying up all night watching whatever they watch. I don't know, probably, or they're not playing video games all night. And you have to do some work on this one, because there's always the neighbor kid who does it all night long and who never seems to have any kind of restriction on his activities. And boy, they want to be just like that. Well, that's not a good thing. Okay, so you have to maintain. Okay, my brother and I both played a lot of sports, but we always had breakfast together. We always had dinner together. Lunch was a little more questionable, but we had every meal. And That didn't matter what was going on, what time of year it was. It was always that way. And that's not a bad model to follow. If you're always meeting together a couple of times a day as a family, it's more likely that you'll start identifying as a family. And that's important. The system, I've talked about systems, okay? We're all part of different systems. There's our marital system, there's our family system, there's our community system. And those are important normalities in our life. They give us a feeling of comfort because the world has lost its mind right now, and you need some support closer to you. So if you haven't been doing a good job with that, do get it started again. This is when we eat. No, you can't just stop by McDonald's. No, you're going to be home eating with us. Da, 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 da. You have to have those times. And then the bedtime thing. That is usually a nightmare until you get it established as a habit. It's once it becomes obvious that, it's that time, we have to get ready for bed. It happens every night. We're going to keep doing it at the same time every night. Da, 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 da. So you have to set that in motion, because it's going to be a nightmare once school starts and they absolutely have to be in bed by a certain time. And so you have to set that up. And another thing you need to be looking at for school particularly is, where do they do their homework? Okay? When they're little, the kitchen table is not a bad place to be doing homework. When they're a little older, and hopefully a little more disciplined and in control, maybe not. So, some are not. But then you don't need to be, constantly monitoring them. The study in your room has become a little bit difficult because there are more games and toys in kids' rooms than, certainly than when I was a kid, but that's not saying much. But, when I was a kid, it was a big deal if you had a turntable that played 45 RPM records, but nobody had a TV in their room, and nobody had a computer, certainly, so we, if you were in your room, you were either reading or listening to records, or writing, heaven forbid. So a lot of people wrote a lot. With computers are a mixed blessing as a parent of an ADHD kid, because you can do a lot of work on those things. And yet, basically, most schools are requiring that you have access to a computer, or at least a tablet. Although some of the countries in the world are saying that this isn't working very well. We're raising kids who can't read, can't write. And it's mostly because everything's on the computer and they can just push a button and something happens that they didn't really, their brain didn't participate in. So, you're not going to handle that one all at once. But my notion is that tablets should be limited before about age 12 or so, somewhere in there is, that shouldn't be an issue. You shouldn't be doing that. And having said that, I've got a couple of grandkids whose father is a total computer geek, and he, they've had a tablet since they were like 4 years old, since they weren't sure how to change the batteries and the darn things. But change the batteries? No, charge the batteries. Anyway, so those are some things you've got to deal with that I didn't have to deal with as a parent. It's just as a clinician all the time. So I mean, once you let it get out of control, it's hard to rein it back in. But it's easier to never give a privilege than it is to take it away once you've given it. You can put that on your doilies if you like. Okay, so those are some of the big issues about getting your child back to school. I've got another couple of things coming up that are more about the actual process of learning and how ADHDers are a little bit different than, a lot different, I guess, than neurotypicals in terms of the way they learn rather, and the way they motivate themselves. That's really different, because you have to. It doesn't work with an ADHDer. Okay, so I will catch you next time, and I'm still Dr. Terry James Gingrass, and this is still Dr. G's ADHD Chat, and we're still trying to make the world safe for ADHDers. Hopefully we're going to redesign the schools sometimes, but I think first we're going to have to redesign the government. But that's another problem that I probably shouldn't waste my time talking about. My website is still terrygingrassphd.com. You can sign up for coaching. Coaching is the best system, without a doubt, for ADHD people. I work with adults and families, and coaching is the best way to deal with that, to deal with ADHD. And it works. I mean, if you also have comorbid kind of thing, anxiety, depression, then you probably need a therapist as well. But coaching is almost like somebody said, oh, I think we should design a treatment approach for ADHD. They would have come up with coaching. Okay, enough about that. But if you want to sign up, we can do a quick meet and greet kind of thing and decide if we can work together. And I also have a newsletter. It's a freebie, and it's got different content than the podcast. Some of the same topics, of course, but it's not, like, well, he talked about that on the podcast this week, so I don't need to read the newsletter. Now the newsletter is going to have different stuff. So, and I'm working very hard at that. So, be nice if you signed up. Okay, and other than that, we're going to have some new things coming down the pike here in a while. I have this problem with, I have 40 plus years of experience in neuropsychology and psychology, and with particular emphasis on ADHD. And sometimes it's hard to narrow things down. Do I just talk about parenting? Do I just talk about ADHD executives? Do I, it's a big world out there, and then 40 years of experience will get you way too many options, I think, is what the problem is. So I'll let you know when I decide exactly where I'm going with this. Okay, we will catch you next week. And remember, we're trying to make the world safe for ADHD, and try to definitely think of it as a neurologic condition. That's the number one thing. And you can't punish your nervous system. You can abuse it, but you can't punish it. And you can't punish your child's nervous system. It just doesn't work. So it's a neurologic condition. Remember that. Keep that in mind all the time. Even when it really seems like they're just being defiant, it's a neurologic condition. Okay, catch you next time.